The reflection. Officer David Miller used to like the way the city sounded at night. On the late shift, the noise thinned out. The worst of the evening rush was gone. The bars were either closing or had already spilled their trouble out onto the sidewalks, and the steady day roar of trucks and buses faded to a softer, stranger mix. Distant trains, a dog barking 2 streets over, the low, tired rumble of an exhaust fan on a restaurant that had stayed open later than it should. His patrol car rolled through it all, its engine an old familiar note under the radio's soft hiss. The dash glowed with its small constellation of lights. The overhead rods cast their faint red and blue glow on the inside of the windshield, even when they were off, reflections from the streetlights swinging past. He kept the window cracked just enough to smell the city. Wet asphalt, old leaves. Somebody's late load of laundry venting dryer linked into the cold air. A whiff of stale beer from the alley behind a bar. Somewhere, far off, river water carrying its own damp metal scent up between buildings. He had worked nights for years. His body knew the rhythm now. A heavier tiredness around midnight, then a strange second wind near 2 in the morning, when the streets could feel like a place between worlds. Then a long drag toward dawn, when the sky picked up a gray edge over the warehouses, and he would feel, just for a moment, that maybe he could keep going forever. The radio crackled with dispatch chatter, codes and addresses, and the occasional flat joke from another unit trying to stay awake. Most of it rolled past him in a practice stream. Noise, but necessary noise. Proof that he was not the only one awake. He had a thermos of bad coffee cooling in the cup holder, the smell of it thick and burnt. The seat springs dug at his back the same way they had the night before, and the one before that. He drove with his left hand draped over the top of the wheel, his right resting near the radio mic, ready without being tense. By the time the clock in the dash crept its way toward the small hours, the city had folded into itself. Storefronts were dark. Apartment windows showed here and there with that milky television light, rectangles floating above empty sidewalks. Streetlights buzzed over damp pavement. The air had that hollow feel it got when most people were sleeping. He pulled slowly through a block of old brick houses, the kind with short steps and narrow porches and postage stamp lawns. His headlights brushed bare trees and the glint of trash can lids. One upstairs window glowed warm and yellow. Someone was pacing in front of it, shadow sliding back and forth. He did not slow. People were awake for all kinds of reasons. None of them called him right now. He passed the corner store where the overnight clerk liked to step out and smoke on slow nights, leaning against the window with his apron loose and his hat pushed back. The metal grate was down tonight. The little bell over the door would not chime until morning. The radio murmured about a noise complaint across town. Another unit answered. A quick exchange about the last time the same caller had reported ghosts in the upstairs apartment. Laughter, short and thin. David let it wash over him. He took another sip of the coffee. It had gone lukewarm and bitter, but he drank it anyway. He turned onto a side street he had driven 100 times. It ran along a stretch of older houses, some well-kept, some sagging, all stacked close together, their front yards cramped and bordered with low fences or hedges. At the far end, the street curved and dropped toward the river, the faint shine of water sometimes visible between buildings. His headlights swept over parked cars, the pale flash of license plates, the gleam of chrome. Mailboxes. A bicycle locked to a lamppost, its frame beaded with moisture. Halfway down the block, his eye snagged on movement. A figure walked along the sidewalk, heading in the same direction his car was going. The man's shape cut clean against the background. Broad shoulders under a dark jacket, hands at his sides. The sheen of reflective strips on his pants caught the light. Uniform. It was not unusual to see another officer walking a beat, even this late. Sometimes a car would be down, and someone would finish the shift on foot. Sometimes the watch commander would have them get out and be seen in a problem area. Sometimes an officer just needed to stretch their legs. Still, something in the posture snagged his attention. The way the man's back was ramrod straight. The angle of his arms. The way he moved, like the motion was something he had been shown, but had not quite gotten used to yet. David eased off the gas. His hand drifted from the wheel to rest fully on the radio mic. The tires whispered over the damp street. His headlights reached out, licking along the sidewalk until they slid over the walking figure. Dark jacket, badge catching the light, the glint of a nameplate. Duty belt settled on narrow hips, the weight of gear making the trousers pull slightly at the seams. Short hair, dark. The familiar curve of the hat brim. He slowed further, curiosity pricking through the fog of routine. There was no foot patrol scheduled on this street tonight, not that he had heard. If someone had come in on overtime, he would have seen the car at the station, heard the chatter. Maybe one of the newer officers had decided to walk a little of his territory. Maybe he had missed a memo. He drew closer. The man's face came into focus in the wash of the headlights. For a split second, it was just another pale oval in a uniform hat. Then the details fell into place. Jawline, straight, a little square at the chin. Nose that had been broken once and never quite sat right again. The tired hollows under the eyes. The faint crease at one corner of the mouth where an old scar tugged. He knew that face. He had seen it in bathroom mirrors at the end of long shifts, skin gone gray at the edges. In the visor mirror of this car, in the reflection of shop windows. In the photo clipped to his own personnel file. In the wedding picture on his dresser, where the same face had been smoothed by a smile and a better haircut years ago. He was looking at himself. His foot snapped down on the brake without conscious thought. The car lurched. Tires grabbed at wet asphalt. The seatbelt bit into his shoulder. The thermos in the cup holder tipped and rattled. The walking figure stopped. For an instant, they were frozen like that. Car at a slant in the street. Headlights pouring over the sidewalk and front yard of a sleeping house, and a man in uniform standing in the beam head turned toward the car. The face turned fully into the light then. Everything in David went cold and hot at the same time. His heart thudded so hard, it felt like it might knock against the inside of his ribs. It was his face. Not a resemblance, not the kind of thing that made strangers say, "You look like my cousin." It was his. Same jaw, same nose, same lines around the mouth. Same hairline starting to retreat a little at the temples. Same faint pucker at the corner of the left eyebrow, where a childhood fall had left a shallow scar. But the eyes, they were wide, too wide, whites showing all around the iris. The pupils looked wrong in the glare, blown and flat at the same time. They did not narrow against the headlights, did not blink. They were empty, not blind exactly, just vacant. As if something behind them had forgotten how to look out. The mouth twitched, then spread slowly into a grin. Not his grin. His smile, when it came these days, was small and tired, lips barely shifting. This was wider, teeth bare. It crawled up his cheeks without touching the eyes. His stomach knotted. His hand clamped around the radio mic hard enough to make the plastic creak. He dragged it off its clip. "Dispatch, this is," he started, but the words jammed in his throat. He heard his own voice in his head, that practiced level tone. Into his ears, though, only a rough rasp made it out, thinner than usual. The radio hissed and crackled. The man on the sidewalk lifted one hand. The motion was slow, deliberate. The fingers had that slight stiffness he had seen in men who had worked with their hands too long, or in someone whose muscles were not quite warm to their task. The hand rose to shoulder height, palm inward, forefinger extended. The rest of the fingers folded, thumb tucked. A point at him. The air in the car felt thin. For a half second, all he could see was that hand, that finger, held out like a line drawn between them. Something in the back of his mind threw up an old childhood memory, unwanted and absurd. His mother standing in a kitchen doorway, finger pointed the same way after he had come home late. The wordless, sharp accusation. "You know what you did." His own face on the sidewalk pointed at him like that now, eyes empty, grin fixed. The world narrowed to that line. He forced breath into his chest. "Dispatch," he managed, voice scraping out. "This is Unit Miller on Maple near Burnside. I have." Static swallowed the rest. The radio popped, then flattened into a steady, low hiss. He took his hand off the mic long enough to thump the side of it with his palm. The sound vibrated up his arm. The hiss did not change. The headlights threw the figure into sharp relief. The uniform was right down to the patches on the sleeves, the placement of the radio on the shoulder, the weight of the duty belt. The badge on the chest glinted. The little rectangular nameplate above it caught a streak of light. Miller, his throat closed. His own badge felt suddenly heavy on his chest, the weight of it pulling at the fabric. He resisted the stupid urge to look down and check that his name still sat there. The figure's grin wavered at the edges, then steadied again, carved into the face like something painted on. The pointed finger might as well have been a barrel. His training, drilled into him over years, tried to assert itself. Assess, contain, call for backup. Do not freeze, do not fixate. He forced himself to move. His left hand eased back onto the wheel, right still gripping the useless radio mic. He shifted the car into park, the gear shift clacking under his hand. He opened the door. Cold air rushed in. The damp smell of the street hit him. Somewhere far off, a dog barked. "Hey," he called, voice steady enough that it surprised him. No response. The grin did not move. The finger stayed pointed. He swung his legs out, boots landing on the slick street. The uniforms they gave them these days were supposed to be breathable, moisture-wicking. Tonight the fabric stuck to his back. He kept the car door open behind him like a shield. "Hey," he said again, a little louder. "You all right, officer?" The word felt strange in his mouth, like he was tossing it out into a room where it did not belong. Up close, the face was even more raw. The skin had a strange flatness to it in the headlight glare, like makeup smoothed too thick over something underneath. The lines he knew so well were all there, but they sat like they had been drawn by hand, landmarks placed in the right spots without the living detail between. His own eyes looked back at him, empty and endless. They did not flicker toward the car, or the street, or his badge. They stayed locked on his. The figure's chest rose and fell in slow, steady breaths. The fabric of the jacket moved with it. There was nothing jerky or unnatural about that part. He was breathing. He was alive. "Do you need help?" David asked. Part of him, absurdly, hoped that the man would blink, laugh, say something about a prank or a costume party, about how wild it was that they looked so alike. Anything but the silence. The grin twitched, widened a fraction. David's fingers tingled. His hand wanted to go to the grip of his sidearm. He made himself keep it down and visible. "You are not supposed to be out here alone," he said, the training pushing the words out. "Where is your unit? Who are you assigned with?" For a flicker of a second, something moved in the other man's eyes. A tiny shift, like the shine on a river when a fish turns under the surface. Recognition, or something like it. Then the emptiness washed back in. The finger stayed pointed. The radio on the man's shoulder sat dark. No power light. No small glow from the display. David's own radio crackled at his belt, just under the edge of his vest. A burst of noise, then a voice cutting through in the clipped, practiced tone of dispatch. "Unit Miller, status check." He heard his own name and grabbed at it like a rope. He raised the mic. "Unit Miller, I am on Maple near Burnside. I have. He glanced up as he spoke. The sidewalk was empty. No man in uniform. No twin face staring back. The little front yard glistened with damp. The grass flattened where his headlights had washed over it. The sidewalk stretched past the house and on down the block, cracked in the same spots it always was. The space where the figure had stood held nothing. His words stuttered. The end of the sentence fell out of his mouth in a tangle. I had a possible pedestrian. Negative, looks clear now. There was a beat of silence. Copy, Unit Miller, dispatch said. Be advised, we have you as only unit in that area. All other cars are clear on that sector. Do you require backup? He opened his mouth to say yes. His own voice sounded strange in his head, thin as paper. The empty sidewalk swam in his vision. His pulse pounded in his ears. He could feel the old familiar risk of getting written up for something vague and off, for dragging backup out on Oast. He thought of the last time some new kid had sworn. He saw someone on the tracks, and it had turned out to be a tarp. He swallowed. Negative, he said. No backup. I am clear. Probably. A trick of the light. He hated himself a little for saying it, even as he said it. The radio clicked. Dispatch went back to its stream of other people's problems. He stood there for a moment longer, the cold seeping through his boots. He walked to the spot where the figure had been. His own shadow stretched before him, long and warped in the headlights. The grass squeaked under his soles. The sidewalk felt solid and indifferent. He crouched, feeling foolish, and ran his gloved fingers over the concrete. It was damp. He found nothing but a cigarette butt, mashed flat, and a stray leaf. He straightened slowly, knees protesting. His own body felt wrong. The weight of the vest on his shoulders. The belt, the ache in his lower back. All of it familiar, all of it slightly off, like he was wearing someone else's gear, adjusted to almost fit. He shook it off. It was late. He was tired. The street was quiet. There was no one here. He walked back to the car, each step heavy. He slid behind the wheel and pulled the door shut with a thud that sounded louder than it should have. For a second, he just sat there, hands on the wheel, staring at the empty sidewalk. In the side mirror, he caught a glimpse of his own face. The reflection was small and warped, broken by the curve of the glass. His eyes looked back at him, shadowed, the lines deeper than he remembered. He forced himself to shift into drive. The car rolled forward. The headlights swung off the yard and onto the road ahead. The empty spot where the figure had stood slid away into the dark. His radio sat quiet at his shoulder, little red light glowing on its face. The soft hiss of the channel was back, familiar and steady. Somewhere in the precinct, the recording system was catching everything he said and did. He drove on. For the rest of the shift, the city felt a step removed. The sounds he had always liked at night train whistles, distant sirens, the murmur of the river seemed smaller, as if someone had turned the volume down on the whole world. He answered a call about a car, parked the wrong way on a narrow street. The owner stumbled out in pajamas, waving a half apology, half excuse, breath smelling of cheap whiskey. David wrote a warning and let him park it straight. The man's words passed him like static. He swung by the hospital to stand in the hallway while a nurse quietly told, woman in a wrinkled coat, that her brother had not made it. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. The plastic chairs on the other side of the glass sat in their crooked row. David stared at the scuffed floor and felt the same weary wash of helplessness he always did in that hallway. It barely made a dent in the dread sitting in his gut. When dawn finally seeped into the sky, pale light bleeding over the industrial district, he turned the car back toward the station. The lot behind the building was half full. The night shift filtered in, cars settling into their spots, drivers getting out with the slow movements of people whose bodies thought they should be asleep. Day shift folks drifted in from the other side, brighter-eyed, coffee cups in hand. He parked in his usual space. The tires crunched over the fine grit that never really left the asphalt. The building loomed, all squat brick and narrow windows. The back door stuck for a second, before giving way with a jerk. Inside, the air was warm and smelled faintly of old coffee, paper, and the lemon cleaner the janitorial crew favored. He passed the evidence room, the records office, the locker room door. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Somewhere, a copier kicked on, paper shuffling. In the squad room, the tired circle of desks wore the usual clutter. Notebooks, pens, coffee mugs with slogans, reports stacked and waiting. The whiteboard at the front of the room still had yesterday's assignments scrawled on it, lines and arrows in different colors. He logged his keys and gun, signed the equipment sheet, and dropped into his chair with a soft grunt. His back popped. The computer on his desk woke up when he tapped the keyboard. The standard blue screen appeared, then the login prompt. He typed his password. His fingers knew it without his eyes checking the keys. The system loaded. Emails, reports, the usual collection of administrative clutter. His eyes skimmed, but did not really register any of it. He should have written up the unofficial call, even if there had been nothing there. An unusual person in the street, a possible impersonator, a contact. You did not just ignore someone in a uniform who vanished like that. At least you were not supposed to. He opened the incident report template out of habit. The cursor blinked at him. He stared at the empty field for narrative. What was he supposed to write? That he had seen himself on a quiet street, with vacant eyes and a wrong smile. That the thing had pointed at him like it had something to say, and had then simply not been there. He thought of the last time reports like that had hit the sergeant's desk. How the jokes had run thin, then mean. Tired Miller, someone would say. Maybe you should get your head checked. Maybe those wellness seminars they keep pushing on us are good for something. He closed the report window without typing a word. On the way out, he passed the wall with the photographs. Nobody called it a memorial wall. Not out loud, but that was what it was. Frames of different sizes, some printed too dark, some faded out in the sunlight that hit them in the late afternoon. Officers in uniform, smiling at the camera. Some from years back, with older-style badges and mustaches that looked strange now. Some more recent. All gone. He glanced at the wall like he always did, the way you might glance at a headstone on a road you traveled often. Respect, habit, superstition. One of the newer friends caught his eye. Young guy, barely out of the academy from the look of him. Uniform sitting a little too crisp on his shoulders. A smile that tried to be serious and did not quite make it. Name printed on a little plate beneath. The last name stuck, though it was common enough. Miller. He knew this photograph. He had seen it when they put it up. The kid had been out on a call by the river. Bad footing on some old steps, wrong angle, bad fall. Not family. They had all joked at the time, even though the last names matched. Just the city's way of making paperwork confusing. He had been on the shift that night, though not at that scene. He remembered the way the radio had gone quiet for a few seconds when the emergency call came through. The way those seconds had stretched. He stepped closer without really meaning to. The kid in the photo did not look like him. The jaw was softer, the eyes rounder. The nose had never been broken. The smile was wider, easier. Under the frame, someone had taped the funeral program, the black and white picture already curling. He removed his hat and stood there a moment. He thought of the empty sidewalk, of his own face staring back from a body that breathed slow and steady and did not speak. On the drive home, the city in daylight felt almost unreal. Commuters honked, school buses lumbered. Construction crews hammered at something on a side street. All that noise washed around the car. Inside, he felt muffled, unplugged. He slept badly. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the grin, the pointing finger, the blank eyes. In one dream, he was the one standing on the sidewalk, watching the patrol car approach, headlights flaring in the damp air. He felt the weight of the uniform, the belt. His muscles were stiff in a way that did not feel like his. The world was silent, like someone had laid thick cotton over his ears. The car rolled closer. He saw his own face behind the wheel, thinner and more worn than the one he knew. He tried to speak, to call out, to ask what had happened. Nothing came out. His mouth stretched into that awful grin without his consent. His hand rose, fingers lifting, index finger pointing. Accusation, warning, plea. The car's headlights washed over him. For a second, the man inside and the man outside were the same. He woke with his heart pounding and the taste of metal in his mouth. The next night, he went back on duty. He did not mention the figure. He took his assignment, checked his car, tested the lights. The radio hissed and crackled. The city on the screen above the sergeant's desk glowed with its grid of streets and little markers where calls had come in. He told himself that whatever he had seen was some kind of misfire. Too many hours, not enough sleep. The mind could throw images like that at you when it wanted to. Then he watched the dash camera footage. It was protocol to run random checks on their own video, now and then make sure everything was working. They had all learned that lesson the hard way, sermons from above about transparency and accountability. Cameras did not lie, the brass liked to say, as if that settled anything. He sat at his desk with a styrofoam cup of fresh, bad coffee and queued up the recording from the night before. He scrubbed through the first part on fast forward, the street lights streaking by in quick white arcs, the noise of the engine and radio blurred. There, the turn onto Maple. He slowed the playback. The camera caught the road ahead, the beam of the headlights cutting through the dark. The little time stamp in the corner rolled over minute marks, the digits a patient march. He tried not to think about the way they carved his life into small, manageable pieces. The figure appeared at the edge of the frame, a pale smudge against the dark of the sidewalk. As the car drew closer, the smudge resolved into a man in uniform, walking with stiff, steady steps. From the dash camera's angle, the man's face was in profile at first. Hat brim shadowed his features. The reflective strips on his pants flashed. David felt his hands tighten on the armrests. He watched himself slow the car. The beam of the headlights washed over the sidewalk. The walking figure stopped. The man turned his head toward the car. The camera caught his face full on. It was his. Every line, every angle, captured in flattened gray. The emptiness in the eyes came through, even in low resolution, a flatness where light should have bounced. The grin moved across the features. Slow, wrong. David's own breath grew shallow. He watched the hand lift. The camera did not linger on the finger. It framed the man from mid-chest up. But the movement was there, the shoulder rising, the arm extending. He listened, heart hammering, to his own voice come through the car's microphone, tinny and smaller than it had felt in his head last night. "Hey, you all right, officer?" The video captured the street in front, not the place where he had stepped out of the car. The empty road yawned ahead, the center lines a pale track. He heard himself report to dispatch. He heard the crackle of the other voice responding. Then, on the screen, the figure on the sidewalk vanished. There was no smear or blur, no flicker. One frame he was there, grin cut into David's face, eyes boring into the camera. The next he was not. The sidewalk shone wet and empty. The little front yard held only grass and a sagging plastic lawn chair. David rewound and watched the moment again, frame by frame, his finger tapping the keyboard. There, his face. The grin, the pointed finger, Tap. Gone. He sat back, the cheap plastic chair creaking under his weight. The proofs were right there in front of him. He had not imagined it. The camera had caught what he had seen. He should have felt some relief in that. Instead, the dread he had been holding at a low simmer flared. The camera had seen him seeing himself. That meant that somewhere on a server in the building, in the tidy digital files they kept to protect themselves and the public, there was now evidence of something that should not be possible. Cameras did not lie. That was the line, anyway. He copied the clip to a separate folder on his desktop, fingers moving automatically, mind buzzing. Then he sat there staring at the file icon, a small, bland square on a screen filled with similarly bland squares. He thought about calling someone over. "Hey, take a look at this, would you? Tell me I am not crazy." He thought of the looks he would get if he did. He closed the window without deleting the clip. For now. The rest of the night's footage rolled by in his mind in a blur of familiar images. Traffic stops, dark alleys. The entrance to the hospital, caught again and again as different units came and went. He could not shake the feeling that somewhere else in those files, the man with his face was walking. That if he scrubbed through enough hours, he would see that figure again, on a different street, at a different time, pointing at someone else. On his next few shifts, he drove Maple a little faster, eyes sliding away from the section of sidewalk where the figure had stood. The houses there looked the same as they always had. Porch lights, drawn curtains, the occasional trash bag left too long. Nothing on the surface to mark that spot as anything but another piece of tired street. The city had plenty of tired streets. He began to notice, in small, nagging ways, that people looked at him differently. Not everyone, not all at once. Just now and then, in small flashes. The day attendant at the gas station, where he liked to grab a coffee before shift, hesitated when he pushed his card across the counter, eyes flicking up to his face, and then away as if trying to place him. "You knew?" she asked, as if she had not seen him in here every week for years. Then she shook her head, embarrassed smile smoothing it over. Never mind. Long days. Everyone blurs. His neighbor down the hall, the older man with the tiny dog that barked at everything, nodded to him one morning in the stairwell and called him by another officer's name. When David corrected him politely, the man laughed and said he was sure he had seen him with that other officer last week. He had not been in the building last week when the man had said. His wife, on the nights he came home before she had to leave for her early shift at the hospital, kissed him and pressed her forehead briefly against his. Once, in that brief pause, she pulled back and blinked at him as if adjusting to something. "You okay?" she asked. "Fine," he said. "You look." She searched for a word. Tired. He wanted to say he had always looked tired. That was part of the job. Instead, he said, "Yeah, long week." Her eyes lingered on him a second longer than usual, like she was comparing his face to another one in her memory. He caught his reflection on shiny surfaces more often now. In the glass of a storefront as he passed, in the black screen of a television in a living room he walked through on a call, in the passenger side window of the car. Every time he looked different from how he thought he would look. Small things. The lines at the corners of his mouth deeper, the crease between his eyebrows sharper, the color of his eyes. Flatter, somehow less warm. His posture a fraction more rigid. He told himself it was the same face. It was just the weight of what he had seen making everything look off. Still, when he brushed his teeth at night, staring into the bathroom mirror, the man looking back did not feel entirely like him. Something in the gaze had shifted. He started waking up with gaps in his memory. They were small at first. He would make a cup of coffee, and then find the kettle still on the stove unlit, the cup empty. Or he would put his keys down on the counter, and then find them later beside the sink, not remembering moving them. On patrol, once, he realized he was on a street he could not recall turning onto. The last thing he remembered was driving along the river, watching the lights of the bridges slide past. Then blink, he was 3 blocks inland, the radio burbling, his own hand reaching up to adjust the volume. He might have chalked that up to the fog of routine if it had not been for the call. Unit Miller, respond to a reported disturbance near Franklin and 3rd, dispatch had said. Caller reports possible officer needs assistance. He had answered, voice steady, giving his position. The distance from where he remembered being the river to the call was reasonable. When he turned the corner onto Franklin, another patrol car was already there, angled half on the sidewalk, lights spinning silently in the sleeping street. The red and blue reflections splashed over the windows of a small laundromat and a darkened tavern. Officer Ruiz stepped out from the doorway of the tavern as David pulled up. She was one of the newer ones, sharp-eyed and serious. Her vest looked almost too big on her, though she carried herself as if she had been wearing it all her life. She frowned when she saw him. I thought you were already here, she said as he walked over. What? He said. She tipped her head toward the tavern. Caller said they saw an officer banging on the door. Uniform looked like ours, but they could not see the car. By the time I got here, there was nobody. Front door locked. Lights off inside. I checked around back. Nothing. She looked past him, toward the spot on the curb where his car now sat. You sure you were not here first? She said, a note of forced humor in her voice. I just pulled up, he said. You saw. She watched his face, searching for something. You all right, Miller? She asked. You look like you saw a ghost. Just a mirror, he thought. On his days off, he found himself drawn to the idea of checking other cameras, storefront systems, traffic cams, security footage from places his shift never touched. It would be nothing to ask, to say he was following up on an impersonation report. They took that seriously after a fake cop had pulled someone over a few years back. He did not. A kind of slow dread held him. If he saw the other man on more screens, moving through the corners of the city, he was not sure what he would do. He went to see the department psychologist. He did not frame it, as he probably should have, as an officer worried about his own stress level and capacity. He made it about work, about patience, about what the wellness flyers liked to call resilience. The psychologist's office lived in a corner of the building that always smelled faintly of carpet cleaner and lukewarm tea. The chair he sat in had too many cushions. Dr. Harris was a quiet man with a tired face and a tie that never quite matched his shirt. He had been on contract with the department long enough to know when someone was playing along and when they were not. How are you sleeping? He asked, pen ticking lightly in his hand. Fine, David lead. How long have you been on nights? Harris asked, though he probably had it in the file in front of him. Years, David said. It can stack up, Harris said. We talked about this before. The body likes patterns, but it still knows when you're doing the opposite of what everyone else is doing. Yeah, David said. He watched the man's mouth move and wondered if he should say it, if he should put it into words and let them hang in the stale air. I saw something, he said. Harris nodded, encouraging. He had probably heard variations on that phrase, more times than he could count. On patrol, David said. On Maple, a man in uniform. He paused. The memory was a sharp stone in his throat. He looked like me, he said. Harris's pen stilled for a second. Then it moved again, scratching softly. Sometimes we see ourselves in places we do not expect, he said. Years on the job, you start to imagine yourself on the other side of the calls. That is normal. I mean, he looked like me, David said, sharper than he meant to. Not just like me, same face. Harris's eyes flicked up, studied his expression. You are sure, he said. Yes, David said. My dash camera caught it. Even as he said it, he felt something in him recoil. He had not meant to share that. The footage was the only hard proof he had. Giving it up felt like handing over the only solid thing in a room full of fog. Harris's eyebrows rose. "You have the video?" "On the system," David said. "From that night?" Harris nodded slowly. "I can request to view it if you would like. It might help to go over it together." The thought of sitting in this soft chair in the overwarm room, watching that clip with someone else, made his skin crawl. "No," he said, too quickly. "It is fine." They sat there in a short, heavy silence. "What did you think when you saw him?" Harris asked. David thought of the grin, the finger pointing, the feeling of being measured and found wanting. "That I was looking at the wrong one," he said before he could stop himself. Harris tilted his head, pen tapping against the pad. "The wrong one," he repeated. "Like he was supposed to be there," David said. "And I was not." The words hung there. Harris watched him, eyes narrowed slightly in thought. "Have you felt that way in other areas of your life?" he asked. "Like you do not belong where you are?" David almost laughed. There it was, the smooth slide into childhood, family, old disappointments, the script. "This was not about childhood," he said. "This was on the street. This was with my badge on." Harris did not flinch. "Sometimes those feelings use the images that will get our attention," he said gently. "Our own face in a uniform is a powerful symbol. It is possible your mind is telling you something it has not found another way to say." David looked away, jaw tight. He should have expected this. There was no category in their books for a man meeting his own original on a dark street. They had boxes for grief, for burnout, for anger. They did not have a tick mark for being replaced. He left the appointment with a recommendation for a few days off and a pamphlet about sleep hygiene folded in his pocket. On the back, in small letters, was a line about how officers sometimes experienced intrusive images and unusual perceptions under stress. It encouraged talking to supervisors, reaching out to peers, not hiding what you saw. When he got home, he set the pamphlet on the kitchen table and stared at it until the words blurred. His wife found it later, smoothed it flat with her palm, and asked him why he had not told her he was seeing the psychologist again. He shrugged. Seemed easier not to. She looked at him in a way that made him feel more exposed than any camera. "Do you feel like yourself?" she asked. His throat tightened. "Yes," he said, because anything else would hurt her. The days blurred. Sleep came in patches. The city moved around him, its cycles indifferent. Garbage trucks, school bells, shifts changing, the river rising and falling under the bridges. He lingered more at the edge of sounds now. In the grocery store, he stood in the aisle and closed his eyes, listening to the buzz of the refrigerators, the murmur of people's voices. In a parking lot, he stood between two idling cars and leaned against the cool metal, feeling the engines vibrate. He was looking for something he could not name, some note that would tell him he was still attached to the world in the same way. He kept thinking of the moment the dash camera had captured. One frame with him, one frame without. Gone, just like that. One evening, as the sky slid from blue to deeper blue, he sat at his desk in the squad room staring at the computer screen. The file with the clip sat in its little folder, an icon that might as well have been a live coal. He glanced around. Most of the desks were empty. A few day shift officers were finishing paperwork, the scrape of their pens and the click of keys filling the room with small sounds. The sergeant's office door was closed. The television in the corner carried a muted news feed, the scrolling banner at the bottom a steady march of bad stories. He clicked the file. The player window opened. The scene appeared. The street. The figure. His face. He watched it all again. The slow turn of the head, the grin, the pointing finger. His own voice over the speakers, thin and slightly distorted. The vanishing. He paused the clip on the frame where the figure looked most directly at the camera. On the screen, the eyes were flat discs, no light in them. The grin pulled the mouth too wide. The finger, though partly out of frame, was clearly aimed straight at the viewer. At him. He sat there, the room around him blurring, and saw his own vacancy. Something like clarity settled over him, cold and unwelcome. The thing in the video was not a ghost of him. It was not a future version, or a warning from some dream of burnout. It was him, the true him, the template, for lack of a better word. Whatever was sitting here at this desk, fingers on this keyboard, heart thudding in this chest, was a copy. The idea slid into place with awful ease. He thought of the way people's eyes had slipped off him lately, like they were not quite sure who they were looking at. Of the small gaps in his memory. Of the way he knew the radio codes and policy manual down to their last comma, but sometimes could not remember what he had eaten for dinner the night before. He thought of the department's quiet push for wellness, for resilience, for continuity. The way they talked about officers as resources to be maintained, not just people who could get tired and leave. He looked at his own hands on the desk, the nails clipped short, the veins faintly raised. He flexed his fingers. They moved when he told them to. Copies could work. Copies could sit in the car, answer calls, write reports. Copies could be sent back out, even when the original had been too bent by what he had seen and done. He had always joked, on bad nights, that the department would clone them if they could, make a version that did not flinch. He looked at the frozen image on the screen. Maybe they had not cloned anyone. Maybe the city itself had found its way to copy what it needed. Maybe there was some slow, unknowable process that watched and learned, then stepped in and filled gaps when the originals faltered. A habit like the lane's hunger, but for people. He did not know how. He did not know when. He knew only that somewhere in the city, a man whose face that truly was walking. The original, stripped out of his life at some quiet moment and left to wander the deep hours where the world thinned. The copy sat here in the fluorescent light, typing up reports. The realization did not come with any grand revelation. No memories opened like doors. No voices whispered secrets. It was just a cold, steady pressure against his understanding of himself. Some part of him wanted to deny it outright, to shove it into the same file as dreams and intrusive thoughts. Another part, the part that had walked those streets year after year, seeing ordinary people break under smaller distortions, knew better. He put his hand flat on the desk. In the thin reflection of the monitor, he saw his own face ghosted over his hand. For a second, the hand did not feel like it belonged to that face. The door to the squad room opened. Ruiz stepped in uniform duty belt slung low. She paused at the sight of him. "Thought you were off tonight," she said. Her voice sounded normal. Her eyes did not. "I am," he said. "Just finishing something." She glanced at the screen. He minimized the window on instinct. The desktop icons shuffled into place. "You okay?" she asked. "Fine," he said. The lie felt thinner now. She hesitated, then went to her own desk, dropping into her chair with a sigh. She rubbed at the back of her neck. "They have been talking about you," she said, eyes on the report in front of her. He froze. "Who?" "Sergeants," she said. "Upstairs. Wellness committee. All the folks who like to sit in rooms and talk about other people's lives." He let out a breath through his nose. "What are they saying?" "That you are due for a break," she said. "That maybe you should not be out on the street until you are sure of yourself again." He stared at the lifeless screen. "Am I not sure of myself?" he asked softly. She looked up then, really looked, and for a moment he saw something like sympathy twist her features. "You saw something weird," she said. "You have not been sleeping. It happens. They do not like it when you admit it, because then they have to figure out what to do with you. So they wrap it in committee words." She flipped a page on her report. "They also said," she added casually, "that your body camera footage from that night glitched, came back with overlap." Two uniforms in one frame. They do not like that either. Makes it look like the system does not work. He swallowed. They think it is a technical problem, he said. They want it to be, she said. Easier that way. She tapped the paper with her pen. Look, she said. I was there at that tavern call. I know you were not. But somebody saw an officer who looked like one of us pounding on that door. They were scared enough to call. They described you. He closed his eyes briefly. I think there is something walking around out there that looks like you, she said. Whether it is you or not, I do not know. I just know the city does not like empty uniforms. It tends to fill them. He opened his eyes. She shrugged. That sounds crazy, right? I am probably just tired. But I know the way it felt on that street, like the night had. Teeth. He looked at her, really looked. She was younger. Her face still had that openness. But there were lines beginning around her mouth now, small furrows. She had seen enough already. You ever feel like you are not the same person you were when you joined? He asked. She snorted softly. Every day. That does not mean someone else took my place, he said, trying a joke he did not feel. She did not smile. Maybe not, she said. But if they did, I would hope the new one would at least talk to the old one. He sat there after she left, the squad room slowly emptying again, the hum of the lights filling the space. Talk to the old one. If he was the copy, and the thing on Maple was the original, then somewhere inside whatever rules were governing this, there might be room for a conversation. For the two versions to stand in the same place for longer than that first jolt. If the city was the kind of place that made copies of people to keep its shifts covered, it might also be the kind of place that allowed originals to haunt the edges. He found himself driving Maple again that night. He did not bother to tell dispatch why he was there. It was just another side street on his route, another line on the map. The houses sat heavy in the dark. Porch lights burned here and there. A lone television flickered behind a curtain, shapes moving across it. The air smelled of wet leaves and cold exhaust. He slowed as he approached the spot. His headlights swept over the sidewalk, the small front yard, the section of concrete where his other self had stood. Empty. He pulled over anyway, put the car in park, turned off the engine. The sudden quiet pressed in, the stillness of a late-night street between calls. The radio murmured, but the sound felt farther away than usual. He sat there, hands on the wheel, and waited. Minutes stretched. The dashboard clock ticked its way forward. The lights in the nearest house stayed steady. Somewhere down the block, a cat darted across the road, its eyes catching his parking lights for a second. He knew how foolish this was. If anyone rolled by, if another unit saw him sitting in the dark on a non-call street, word would get around. Miller, parked on Maple, waiting for ghosts. He almost shifted into drive when he saw movement. Not in the sidewalk this time. In the side mirror, a shape moved at the edge of the reflection, just outside the pool of the car's lights. A hint of motion in the deeper shadow between two houses. He turned his head slowly. Through the passenger side window, he could see the narrow gap between a white clapboard house and the brick one beside it. A small alley, more a walkway than anything, lined with trash cans and stacked lawn chairs. A man stepped out from the darkness between the houses. No headlights caught him this time. He was lit only by the weak spill from a porch light 2 doors down and the faint glow from a street lamp at the corner. Still, there was no mistaking the shape. Uniform, hat, duty belt, broad shoulders. The face came into view as he stepped onto the sidewalk. It was David's. Not as the mirror showed it now, tired and sharper, but as it had been a few years into the job, before the lines had dug in fully. The jaw a little fuller, the eyes less shadowed. The grin was gone. The mouth was a straight line. The eyes, though still too wide, carried something in them now. Not the old warmth, but not complete emptiness either. The man stopped on the sidewalk, a few yards in front of the patrol car. David's hand went to the door handle. For a moment he hesitated, the absurd thought crossing his mind that if he got out, he would discover there was no real ground under his feet, that everything he trusted would fall away. He pushed the door open. The night air hit him. He stepped out, boots on wet pavement, and closed the door gently behind him. They faced each other over the small stretch of street. Up close, the other man's uniform looked worn. Not in the way a current officer's did with frayed seams and scuffed leather, but more like a suit that had been left hanging too long, the fabric holding the memory of a body that had moved in it and gone. The badge on his chest glinted dull. The nameplate above, it was clear even in the low light. Miller. David's own badge felt like a weight pulling him forward. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. He did not know how they would do it. Did the original have a voice? Did the copy? He broke first. "What are you?" he asked. His own voice sounded thin in the open air. The other man's mouth shifted. The line of his lips trembled, then held. David took a step closer. "You are me," he said. "Or I am you. Or we were the same once." The man's gaze flicked to his hands, to his belt, to the patches on his sleeves, as if cataloging. Then his eyes rose to meet David's again. There was recognition there now, and something like pity. "You do not remember," the man said. The voice was his, but not. Fuller, deeper. It slid through his mind like a memory of a song. The sound was not quite carried on air. It sat more in his head than his ears. David swallowed. "Remember what?" The man tilted his head, studying him. "The river," he said. "The fall. The cold." Images surged up. Wet stone steps leading down to the water, slick with algae. A handrail rusted through in spots. His own hand catching that rail as his foot slipped, fingers closing on metal that gave way. The weight of his belt pulling him sideways. The sudden, shocking cold of the river closing over his head. He had always remembered that call in pieces. A domestic complaint that turned into a chase, suspect vaulting a low fence, him following too quickly. The report had framed it as a near miss. He had come back soaked and shivering, embarrassed, with bruises on his ribs and a lecture from the sergeant about footing. The memory that rose now was not a near miss. He felt again the sharp, blunt crack at the back of his head as it hit something under the water. The strange, slow flaring of light behind his eyes. The helpless thrash of his legs as the current grabbed him. He remembered a moment of weightlessness as he let go. Then nothing. He stared at the man in front of him, breath shallow. "I died," he whispered. The other man did not nod, did not smile. His face remained that tense, still landscape. "You stopped," he said. "They pulled you out. They pressed on your chest. They pushed air into you. Somewhere in there, someone decided you were too useful to lose." David's hand went to his own chest, palm pressing against the vest, as if he could feel some seam he had not noticed before. "How?" he asked, the word pushed out on a thin stream of air. The other man shook his head. "I do not know the words they used in their rooms," he said. "Simulation, reconstruction, continuity of operations. They had been watching you, collecting you. All the footage, all the paperwork, all the hours in the car. Enough to build a version that could get back in the driver's seat." David's mouth went dry. "You are saying I am a copy," he said. The man's eyes flicked over him, from boots to hat. "You are the sum of everything they kept," he said. "All the ways you moved, all the ways you talked. They smoothed out the parts they did not like. The hesitation, the anger. They filled in the gaps with policy." David thought of the pamphlets, the resilience trainings, the way they had always talked about officers as assets. "Why are you out here?" he asked. "If I am filling the space, what are you?" The other man's face tightened. "I slipped," he said. "Whatever they did, whatever they pulled me through, it did not take all the way. There was a part left over. It ended up in the city's quiet corners." He glanced down the street, toward the river. "You see us sometimes," he added. "The leftovers, walking where the lights are thin. People call in ghosts and doppelgangers and all that. The department hates those reports. Sends someone like you to make them go away." David's legs felt unsteady. "I am sorry," he said, though he was not sure what he was apologizing for. The man's gaze softened, just a fraction. "You did not ask to be built," he said. "I did not ask to be pulled apart." They stood there in the thin sodium light, two versions of the same man looking at each other across a narrow street in a city that had gotten used to patching its own holes. "Why point at me?" David asked, recalling that first awful gesture. "Why?" "Accuse." The man's mouth twisted. For the first time, a hint of the old grin ghosted there, but without the wrongness. "I needed you to see me," he said simply. "I did not know how else to make you stop." Silence stretched. Somewhere far off, a siren wailed, rising and falling as it moved through other streets, other lives. "What happens now?" David asked. The other man's shoulders lifted in a small, weary shrug. "You keep driving," he said. "You keep answering calls. You keep doing what they built you to do." "And you?" David asked. The man looked past him, toward the dark between the houses. "I keep walking," he said, "until I fade, or until someone decides to erase the rest of us." David's chest ached. "That cannot be it," he said. "There has to be something, some way to put us back together, to, I do not know, make one of us real." The other man's gaze came back to him, steady and sad. "You are real," he said, "just in the way they needed you to be. That is the problem." He took a step backward toward the space between the houses. "There is one thing," he added. "You can remember. You can refuse to let what they did turn into just another story officers tell each other on long nights. You can feel how wrong this is every time you sit in that car and not let that feeling dull." He paused, eyes flicking once to the patrol car. "And maybe, when you see others out there with faces that look a shade too empty, you can look for the ones walking in the quiet," he said. "You can let them know they are not completely gone." His outline blurred at the edges. "Wait," David said, hand half extended. The other man's eyes met his one last time. Something passed there. Recognition, resignation, the thin thread of shared memory. Then he stepped back. The shadows between the houses seemed to swallow him. One moment he was there, solid and present on the sidewalk. The next, the narrow gap held only darkness and the faint silhouette of stacked lawn chairs. David stood in the middle of the street, hand out, breath clouding in the cold air. The porch light 2 doors down clicked off, plunging the block into deeper shadow. His radio crackled at his shoulder. "Unit Miller, status check," dispatch said. He swallowed, hand dropping to his side. "Unit Miller, clear," he said. "On Maple, everything is." Quiet. He slid back into the car, the seat groaning under him. The interior smelled of vinyl and old coffee, and a faint trace of the cologne he had been using for years. He put his hands on the wheel. They felt like his. He looked at his reflection in the rearview mirror. The eyes looking back at him were still a little too flat, the lines around them a touch too deep. But he could see, behind them, the memory of water closing in, and the shock of being told that death was not the end, just a handoff. He started the engine. The patrol car rolled forward, a moving island of light in the sleeping city. He drove the quiet streets, his mind heavy, not just with the rhythm of another late shift, but with the knowledge that somewhere in the spaces between streetlights, something with his face was walking, watching, waiting to be seen. He could not change what had been done. He could not call the brass into a room and make them admit that the city ate its own and spit them back out more compliant. He could drive. He could answer calls with a little more impatience for euphemisms, a little less tolerance for the way they smoothed over the rough edges of what people endured. He could look twice at the reports that mentioned strange figures in uniforms. He could stand a little longer in those quiet doorways, listening for footsteps that did not quite match the noise. He could live in the crooked, compromised way he had been brought back to live. The city slept and woke and slept again. Engines hummed, radios crackled. Somewhere beyond the patrol routes, in the thin places where light and sound thinned, originals and copies passed each other in the dark, each a silent witness to the other's existence. On a damp side street, just after the deepest part of the night, a patrol car eased around a corner. Its headlights fell on a figure walking on the sidewalk ahead, posture stiff and unnatural in a familiar uniform. This time, Officer David Miller did not slam on the brakes. He slowed, steady and deliberate, hand resting on the radio mic, eyes wide open.